So today we're going to run through our P6-QA tool. This tool really helps you hunt down problems and deficiencies in schedules right within your P6 environment. I'm Nicole Jordan. I'm the CEO of Emerald Associates, and I'm joining you today from Calgary. And doing the heavy lifting is Sue Familia from Wyoming, and she is going to do the live demo. So let's touch on, before we jump in, let's touch on some of the common struggles that we face as a group using P6. So depending on your particulars, you may be working with a very strong group of P6 users. You might also have a group that's quite a bit varied depending on their skill set, not only within your team, but also the broader team that is executing your project. So you might have small mom and pop subcontractors delivering portions of the project. You might have remote groups from other parts of the world. We really get quite a varied group of users in our P6 community. So let's start with a quick question. Does your team get schedules from other contractors, other parts of the world, and do you have mandates to adhere to specific business practices? Okay, not everyone does. So just curious kind of what the experience of the people on the session are today. And we'll share this I'll give another second to vote, and then we'll just share it for those who had a chance to respond. And we keep these polls, and we put a list of poll results out on our website at the end of last year. And we've shared that in some of our mailers as well. It's interesting to see the varied experience we've got. So if you do get schedules in and you want a very consistent, repeatable way to critique them, to say whether this is a good schedule, highlight any of the gaps perhaps in the way the schedule's been put together. This is what P6-QA brings to the table. So you can get a more consistent, repeatable approach to analyzing P6 schedules, whether you've got a bench full of experts using P6 for years and years, or whether you don't. And that's really what P6-QA brings. The other thing is you want to be able to critique all the different facets of what you have in P6. So everyone uses P6 for scheduling, so timing, dates. Others, I think a poll that Oracle did years ago, it's probably 5 to 6 years old. They found that 60 to 70% of the people also use resourcing, and 30 to 40% of the people also use costing. So you want to be able to review all the different things that would make a schedule of high quality or not quite up to the standards. So let's ask one other quick question here. How do you currently check your schedules when you get them in? Do you manually review them? Do you use an outside contractor to critique them, especially for your larger projects? Do you have any other tools that you might be using, or do you just kind of take what you get and not really do a heavy duty critique on it? Okay, so these are some of the different things that we've seen. Certainly over the years, we've been hired, Emerald, to do schedule critiques. And you know what? That was one of the reasons we started to build P6-QA, because we found that although we brought value, the price tag sometimes was expensive, and there needed to be a better way for the schedulers to do their own critiquing as schedules came in. So that really was what prompted us to build P6-QA several years ago and get it out more as a tool for our clients and new users as well. Okay, one last quick question, and then we're going to start jumping in. How often do you have to check schedules? So one of our big users is a client that critiques schedules every 2 weeks, and they have 50 to 100 schedules that are coming in every few weeks from various contractors because it's a large construction program. So it really is going to depend again on what you've got. And if you're getting updates frequently, that's another thing because you want to be reviewing the updates as well. You don't want to critique it just at the beginning and then never critique it again. Okay, so I shared some of the responses that people put forward. It's important to keep critiquing as time goes on because you want a reliable, consistent schedule, and as updates come in, things change, and you need to keep critiquing that. Now, the other thing that we've found is we have clients with a lot of very specific business processes that they've introduced in their specifications for scheduling, and it wasn't easy for them to do quick critiques. So this is something that we built into P6-QA. It allows you to develop your own critique elements, business processes, and Sue will show you some of those. Like if you use resources, do you have to use roles? Okay, so that might be something you want to introduce, especially if you're a large organization, because you want to be able to roll resources up to roles and do different Power BI outputs or Tableau outputs. Okay, so this is how you can introduce additional critiquing, flagging to make sure that not only your project reporting holds together, but also some of your corporate reporting. Okay? And we talked about how important it is for your own team to be able to do the analysis, not just having to go and get other third parties to help you do the critique, especially on an ongoing basis, right? It might make sense to have someone help you at the beginning and then you take it on from that point forward. So the benefits really are very vast on P6-QA. So let me give you a quick overview on how it works, and then Sue is going to jump in and show you live how you can use QA to critique your schedules. So we critique a variety of things. Of course, schedule quality is going to be number one. So whether you've got logic ties missing, what types of logic ties, do you have a vast amount of leads or lags, negative lags, and which would be a lead and a lag. How are your durations? Do you have activities that are very short and others that are very long, which it's going to make it very hard to do updating. Okay, so those are some of the standard types of things that people are looking at all the time in P6-QA. Then we get into other layers in the schedule quality. So constraints, we go beyond, we start looking at resources and costs, and we look at updating. Okay, so did you do your updating effectively? Do you have dates that make sense? Do you have percent completes and resources that make sense? And so Sue will jump into some of those to give you an idea of how extensive all the checking is. Now, any of you have got into conversation, discussion on standards and what makes a good schedule, it can get pretty heated. Now, there are standards out there, and what you're going to find is P6-QA will help you adhere to many of the standards. And that's really an important thing, that especially if you're an engineering company and you're working with different owners and they've got different standards, P6-QA will help you adhere to a bunch of them out in the marketplace. If there's a gap, it's easy to fill with a little bit of consulting. Standards take maybe 1 to 2 hours to implement new ones generally. So you can always enhance the product for your own particular use as well. And that's how we introduce business process specific standards that you want to include. As I mentioned, resources or expenses. Maybe if you use expenses, they must have a cost account. That might be a business process that your team is using. So you can introduce those quite simply. They're easy to add. And that allows it to be very flexible. Okay, so the standards don't have to be exactly the same on a large CapEx project versus a small shutdown, turnaround, outage type project or an ongoing operational expense, short, quick hit project. So you can have different standards for each of those different types. And you can also have different standards depending on the stage that the project is at as well. Okay, so it's very flexible, it's easy to use, it's not hard to learn, and that's really why we built this tool, is to get those checks into the system. And as new checks are being introduced into the marketplace, we're keeping this up to date. Okay, so we've got calendar checks, different statistics that we're producing, and different logic types that we've added in the last little bit. Okay, so it is a tool that we're continuing to update. We've got several clients using it full force on their different programs. Okay, Sue, you want to take over and give the group a deep dive?
Sure thing.
Okay, I'll hand it over. Coming your way.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen so we can take a look at P6-QA. And so can you see it? Are you seeing it okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
Looks good.
Perfect. So P6-QA can be run either in web and client. I mean, obviously I'm using client today so that we can take a look at it. And so I'm showing at the project level a view showing kind of a snapshot of schedule quality indicators here. We're seeing a whole bunch of projects where P6-QA has been run. So displaying this kind of quality metrics, and in this case, these are schedule quality metrics. These might be some of the things that you would want to look at. So, I mean, obviously, red is not good. Green is good. And in some cases, you might see a yield sign. I don't have any right here on this screen, but we'll see some in the activities. And that indicates that this is a warning. So this lets you know very quickly at a visual level on how well you're doing on these metrics. So this essentially is kind of a quick dashboard, if you will, of schedule quality indicators. So P6-QA can be run in a few different ways. So you can decide whether you want a project to be run. So that's, you just put a yes or a no, and it's going to indicate to P6-QA whether you want it to pick up this project and run schedule quality on it. Now you have a few options when you're going to run. So if I just pop this open, I have the ability to decide how frequently I'm going to rerun QA on a particular schedule. So I can go, we can go hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and of course, manually. So depending on what phase you're in of your schedule or what you are, where you are, or, the length even of your schedule, you might want to set these at different types of frequencies. But in the way of wanting, if say you're developing your schedule, right, at the moment, and you're wanting to self-check, uh, what you can do is you can simply go out and clear out this last run date, which is going to tell P6-QA that you are ready to run this right now. So it's going to go out, it's going to pick that up, and it's going to rerun the schedule quality metrics on that. So as you're working, maybe building a schedule or what have you, and you are self-critiquing, you can do this very quickly on the fly, so to speak. So when we're looking at schedule metrics, and I'm just going to refresh here so that we can see that it comes in and it'll tell me, the date and time that this was actually run. So let's just take a look at some of these schedule metrics that we have here. We have some metrics with duration. We've got some float, logic missing. We have leads and lags over here a little bit further. This is telling me if I have these in my schedule and letting me know that perhaps, I probably want to check these. They are red at this point. So we also have, our logic. So we can find if we have logic that isn't quite all the way through our schedule. It's going to let us know whether we don't have predecessors, whether we don't have successors, things of that nature. It's also looking at hard constraints, hard and soft, as well as logic types. So perhaps um, the easiest, well, not perhaps, but the easiest type of logic to understand and manage is really focused on a finish to start. So, trying to drive your scheduling team into building schedules with primarily finish to start type logic might be something that you want to monitor, that you want to take a look at. And we do have, of course, resources. So it's checking to see if there are resources across the board and that they are assigned on those activities. But you may not necessarily want to look at all of these. You may, you may have some that you're not that you don't necessarily look at. Well, the good thing about that is that these are configurable. So you can decide which ones you are going to be taking a look at and monitoring, and maybe some that maybe aren't the same as well, that you just really aren't necessarily interested in, that it's not something that you look at. So it's really easy to configure this. So if I go in, I'm just going to change a layout here, and I'm going to take a look at where we can set schedule quality criteria. So I'm just going to open up another layout that's going to give me some of the information and how it's set up for each one of my projects. Now, each metric has a configuration for what it will flag: red, yellow, or green. So the criteria has a value, as you can see in our durations here. It could vary depending on what type of schedule. So maybe your turnarounds, if you're doing a turnaround, it might just be a few shifts that you want to define as your hours or your duration that you want to flag. Or maybe a capital project is going to be a few weeks. So it just depends on that. So in the case that I wanted to set a different duration on a different project, you can see that we've got different, what we define as high duration on these. I would simply just click in here and maybe change this to something different to have it look at a smaller duration and flag it and say that I want to look at that smaller duration instead. So I can include these on, you know, say perhaps my templates that I'm using for each one of my projects. And then if it's needed, they could be changed to be specific to the project itself. So the same holds true with these other metrics as we go along here. Some have percentages. So in the case of our high duration here, what this is saying is that I only want to show a red stop sign if 5% of my activities are showing missing logic. So that, a 5 out of 100 activities. So it's configurable based on what your tolerance is going to be for um, the high duration activities. But I can set that for each one of my metrics here. So I've got, my float. What do I consider high float? What is my tolerance on here? Um, my missing logic, my leads, my lags. So I can configure each one of these to fit what I want to um, monitor and how and what threshold I want to monitor. So in this case, I'm going to keep this duration at 240, and I'm going to take my duration down to 0% tolerance. Um, and I think I'm going to change my missing logic here as well. So we can kind of see some tolerance uh, when they change and how those flags are going to run on this project. So I can go in and then I can, I'm going to go back to my other crate or my other layout so I can uh, get my schedule to run again. Just going to blank out that there, and it may not, it's not going to change any of these. I apologize. I must have, I picked probably some wrong examples, but it's going to go out. It's going to take those new metrics that I just set, and it's going to run that schedule based upon those tolerances and those settings that I just did. So yeah, none of them changed. So I apologize. I chose some wrong ones. There are some bad examples anyway. So if I wanted to dig in to see what each one of these are telling me, we have notebooks that we provide. So I'm going to go into my schedule quality validation notebook, and I'm just going to pop it open here and make it bigger so we can see it. Hopefully you can see that fairly well. So it's going to give us an accounting. So it digs in a little bit deeper into some statistics on what's going on with my particular schedule, with this schedule when QA was run. So I can see where the target, especially on my, what did I look at? I looked at, I believe it was my open ends. Now I can't even remember what I did. Okay, so anyway, so it's telling me my target. That's that percentage that I was talking about. This is going to tell you what your percentage of tolerance is. So in the case of these dangling activities here, I have a 5% tolerance. 5 out of 100 of my activities can be dangling, and I'm still going to get a green. However, since I don't have any tolerance, I have 0% tolerance on any of my predecessors or successors, I'm getting a red, and it's telling me that. So if I scroll down and I take a look at uh, these items that are down below, it's really going to dig into a deeper layer of we are where these particular anomalies are happening. So in the case of my open ends, I can see that I have 15.62 that are not conforming to my metrics. And it's also giving me a list of the activities. And in this case, whether they're missing a predecessor or successor, or if the case was true, both. So it's going to tell me which activities are not conforming to that. So not only can I look at these and go down and see these activities that are not conforming, I can also go to the activity level. So I'm going to close down this notebook and I'm going to open up my activities on this. So in activities, we find that we get the same type of indicators. So you can see here where we have our yellows as well. So you can see really quickly which activities are meeting the standards that we want to achieve and which ones are not. So building layouts to highlight what you want to critique is going to make it consistent for all of your schedulers and everyone who is going to be critiquing these schedules. So they're all using cr- um, the standards, the same standards for each one. So we can see that we've got, our hydration, where our hydration now over here. We've got some that are marked red, and I don't know why it does that to me, but I can see that I might want to dig in and see what kind of hydration we're looking at. So remember, we did 240 hours. It's flagging that for me because this one is 6,262 hours. So you could split, you could handle this. Maybe you would want to split up this activity, since it has a longer duration, so that you could. Well, and this is a bad example because it is overhead. But let's say project sanctioning. Well, no, that's not it either. But extraction or whatever. Maybe there are specific um, phases to this activity that maybe I would want to break out and take a look at, so that there's more visibility into what's actually happening with this activity. So this is going to allow you to flag that and alert you when you have what you consider a long activity. So we also have logic here. So with logic, it's letting me know, and I'm just going to pull this down a bit so we can see better. It's letting me know when I have either a predecessor or a successor that's missing, and as well as I can see on separate columns predecessors and successors. So in the case of this extraction one, and I'm taking a look here. I could go into my relationships. I can see that I don't have a successor on it, and I would want to probably correct that. This extraction here, I take a look and I see that maybe I need to put some logic in to close up those gaps on there, because I'm sorry, it
It,
makes it go away
it does that
when
to
I
me
click.
too. It does that to me too. So something
So,
there.
so perhaps on this commissioning one, that I have some things that are uh, my pre-commission, I guess. Um, Perhaps I want to assign a, a predecessor to that. So I could go in and sign that predecessor. Not sure what we want to put here. I'm just going to go with the activity that is just prior to, and I would assign that activity. Make sure I'm doing predecessors. Nope. Yep, I am. And it's not going to allow me to do it. So
Yeah, it's probably making a loop. Yeah,
there
there
we
we go.
go. Okay. So then I could go in, I could correct it, rerun my QA on it, and get my information and see if that has corrected everything I needed to on that particular activity. Now, what else I might want to take a look at is I can see that I have my yellow uh, indicators here. These are my warnings. So in this case, this is a startup plant activity. So this is quite possibly the last activity in my schedule. So what I could do is I could go in and say, okay, it's okay that this does not have a successor. And what I could do is I can go flag it with a blue star, indicating to P6-QA that I have indeed taken a look at this activity, and I am okay with that not having a successor on it. Now, I might want to do the same thing with my project sanction here, because that is my first activity. I know that it doesn't need to have a predecessor, so I can flag that as well. Now, what that is going to do is it's going to essentially override that check. So we can let P6-QA know that I've reviewed it, and it's all right. It's fine, that it does not adhere to my metrics that I set out there. Now, not only do we have schedule quality types of checks, we have business processes, as Nicole mentioned. So I'm just going to go and open up some business processes so we can take a look at some of the indicators that some of our clients um, are using for their business process metrics. So in this case, we have several things going on. We have, our activity ID format. Um, if you have the same name on activities, this can be rather confusing if you're doing different types of layouts and filtering and things like that. So essentially, what we're saying here is that every activity name must be unique. So you don't have, things like several activities that say commissioning, 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 or what have you. So it's going to go and it's going to compare that. Um, oh, this is ID. I'm sorry. So your ID format and then your name format. Perhaps you are interested in making sure that you have a certain activity type or the majority are a certain activity type. In this case, we're looking for fixed duration in units. We do have some that are not set to that right now. Those are something that maybe we want to go take a look. Might be okay that they are not fixed duration in units, but it'll flag those and show you where you might want to go and critique that. Make sure that that is actually the activity type that you intend. Then you could set that blue star to say I've looked at it and it's okay, and then rerun and possibly get a better outcome on your indicators here. We can also set mandatory codes. So to a lot of our clients, this is pretty important. They have certain standards that for their corporate reporting or what have you, that there are mandatory codes that must be filled in. We can flag those mandatory codes and report on whether they or not they are actually assigned. So it looks like we're doing pretty good on our mandatory codes here. And the way that we would flag these as mandatory codes is I'm just going to pop open really quick in my activity codes here. Um, and I can see that we've got a couple that have stars in them. These are indicating that these are mandatory codes. And the one that I am looking at for sure on this one is this responsibility code here. So we want to make sure that our responsibility code is assigned on every activity because it is mandatory. So it's going to go and it's going to flag those and let me know about that. Now, maybe it's important to me to make sure that I have roles assigned. Maybe we're doing some roll ups at the corporate level, and we want to make sure that those roles are filled in so that that reporting is accurate. We have our primary resource. So perhaps, we're using this on a report somewhere and we want to make sure that a primary resource is actually assigned. And as Nicole mentioned earlier, you know, for costs, we're integrating to maybe an ERP or something for our cost control. Um, our cost accounts are going to be important, so it's going to be monitoring that. So we can make sure that those land in the proper place. We can also take a look at expense categories and steps. So again, we have a notebook to take a look at all of these. So if I go into my business process validation on this one and I pop it open, I can again see those metrics that I've I've set out there, and I'll go look at that criteria in just a moment. And then as I go down, I can go and I can see what is uniform and what is not. What is making sure that it's taking a look at. So I can see on my on this one here, I have a particular format that's set out, and that format is fairly easy to build out. So I can here it's telling me, it's expecting a letter first, then it's expecting a number, and then a dash, and then a letter, 3 letters actually, a dash, and then 3 numbers. So it's going to look for that format and compare it to what we have set out here. Then I can take a look at my activity level, see which ones are not measuring up, and decide whether it's okay or whether I need to change that and make sure that that is adhering or not. So let's take a look at how that criteria for business processes are actually set up. So it's the same thing as with our schedule up criteria, very similar. I can go and I can define each one of my criteria for my business processes. So we can see how we're going to build those out. So, excuse me. We'll define our metrics. We're going to monitor, perhaps, build these again into your templates so that the team has them starting out. And then as they are moving forward, they can change these. And as the project goes along, as they're building out their project, and change them as needed for a specific project. So we can see here where I've got my activity ID format, and it's, that showed you how we built that out. The activity ID percent tolerance. So 10% of my activities do not need to adhere to this particular format. Now, this might be the case, like say in your major milestones or something like that. Maybe you don't put the same type of format pattern on those. Those might be ones that are okay to have them not be completely adhering to that. So I want to pop on over to my business processes as well in my project. So I'm going to go and open that layout for business processes and take a look at those indicators. And take a look at each one of these. So I can see here that on my activity ID format, I've got those milestones that are not fitting in to my criteria. Well, these are major milestones, so I might again want to go in and flag those with a blue star, saying I've looked at these. They are indeed not don't have to adhere to that, so I can flag those. Some other things that we might want to look at. We can see where I have my mandatory code that's missing on particular activities. I can also see my activity type of fixed duration in units. So on these level of efforts, of course, that isn't something that I need. Maybe I don't want to have fixed duration in units. I want something else. So I can certainly blue star these if they are okay. But then the rest of them, as I go down, I can see very easily which ones adhere, which ones don't. I could also use a sort to make that easier for me to find those and put them right up at the top of each one of my bands. I could also use filtering if I wanted to, and filter on perhaps the red and the yellow indicators, so that I just can concentrate on the ones that are not necessarily fitting into the metrics that I have defined. Now here I've got my finished starts with legs, my finished starts with leads. I've also got my roles here, the primary resources, as I talked about earlier, and my cost accounts, steps, and my expense categories. So I can monitor all these. I can take a look and make sure that as I'm building my schedule out, that I am actually getting in all of those business processes that are important to my organization. So,
Hey, Sue, do
yes,
you want to show the group the calendar monitoring?
absolutely.
Okay.
So in our projects area, we had a client who was, oh, and I don't see, yep, here it is, um, who was very interested in taking a look at how each one of their calendars measured up, so to speak, and whether they conformed. So we built them a notebook that actually shows them how that all measures up. So what they wanted is they wanted to make sure that their days of the week were consistent across, as well as the work times here. So I can see that I've got the mismatch across the calendars, where it's saying red, We not all of them go from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We have an outlier here. And so they wanted us to flag that, to take a look at each one of the calendars that's used in this project and show us which ones are not necessarily the same as the others. So this flagged it really quickly for them to see that there is a 24-hour calendar in here. And so that was something that they wanted to make sure. They wanted to make sure that their calendars were in sync and to pinpoint that as they critiqued each one of their schedules from their contractors that were coming in. So this was something that we built specifically for that client. So that was another business process. So the idea is here that we you can build in the business processes that are important to your organization. These can be made so that what is important to you to monitor is actually being monitored all in one place. So in a lot of cases, in the way of perhaps you know looking at, I don't know, missing logic, you might say, yeah, I can throw that predecessor or successor column up in my activities and see whether I'm missing logic. Well, yeah, that's all fine and good, but in some cases you can't do that. In some cases you might like for instance the high duration. It's going to take a little bit more for you to go through each one of those activities, especially on a large schedule that are going to be what you considered a large duration. So the idea is this is going to bring it all into one place for you. It's going to be all on one layout, one area where you can see each one of those important metrics in one dashboard, if you will, type of layout. So as you're going through, this was creating a layout here. Now I'm just going to change over to um, when you're updating, there are some other metrics that you're probably going to want to be taking a look at. So I'm just going to switch to an updating type of layout, and I'm going to go down to one of my updates that I've received. Actually, I'm going to do this one here because it was ran more recently. So if I receive or if I receive the updates maybe from a contractor or something of that nature, I can come in, I can run P6-QA on it, and I can now go into that next layer of P6-QA where I can look at when I get an update, um, what types of things do I want to understand and make sure I take a look at. So one of them would be, how are my durations playing out? How are they coming together? Are my remaining durations longer than my original duration? This would let me know if the activities are getting maybe extended. Um, they may be on time, but perhaps they started early and the duration is getting longer and longer. That may have an impact on my resources as well as my costs. So this could be a very helpful flag to monitor. This could be something that is helpful to monitor so that I can see those and see if there's a pattern that's coming up. The same thing with my late finishes on or yeah, my late finishes on some of my activities. Are are those activities, which are finishing late? Um, Maybe they're not on the critical path, but if this reveals a pattern that all the activities are perhaps getting later and later, it might eventually affect that critical path. So I want to monitor those. I want to take a look and make sure that these aren't something that are going to eventually affect my critical path. Of course, we have our original duration um, compared to our baseline duration. How are they comparing? Are they lining up? Are they not lining up? Um, Activities that are finishing late, let's flag those. Let's see which ones are finishing late. I might also be concerned about my finish date being after my original, or excuse me, my data date. Now, again, this might be okay, but they may have said, they're going to finish it this week, and so this is okay if this is red. Um, Negative float, of course, we're monitoring negative float, and then we're taking a look at some of our resources here. So perhaps we're going longer, and our resources are becoming over budget. This is going to make a difference on those. We also have, if we have activities that have been started and are in progress or finished, but they're actually missing any types of actuals on them. That's something that, maybe it was a mistake on the update. Um, and we need to flag that and get those actuals put in there. Um, Is the data date before the actual date? Again, this might be okay. Maybe they're going to be finishing it. It just makes things a lot easier to find as you're going through, all in one place with very clear indicators on each one of these criteria. So let's just, I'm going to open this project and pop on over to the activities window with this project that's got some updates on it. And I'm going to change again my layout so that we can look at a layout for updating. And again, I can see very easily. I have an actual duration that's larger than my baseline duration. Something I'm going to want to track, something I'm going to want to monitor and make sure that that doesn't get out of line. And of course, what went along with that is that it also finished late. So that makes sense that we do have those two red indicators here. So I also have, let me open this up just a little bit. I can also look at my actual dates greater than my data date. So on this one here, I've got that anomaly going on. I might want to take a look at that and make sure. So a lot of these items can be useful in the case of where you may have a claim or dispute. So when you are finding these, you're going to want to document it. You're going to want to use maybe a notebook or maybe a user defined field to document that this is occurring, perhaps why, things like that. Uh, if they're documented, it's a lot easier when a dispute or a claim comes up that you have that right there for you to refer to and to help you with that claim. Now, again, if I scroll over here a little bit, I've got my resources that are here. I've got my actuals, and I've got one I can see where I've started this activity, but it is not. It has no actuals on it. Why? Why does it not have those actuals? Is it a mistake? Um, it Did they just miss it on their data entry? It can help you just pick up those things very quickly and very easily, just by looking at your indicators that you have. Now, in the case of, our actuals that might be, and I thought I have an actual right here. My actuals here, perhaps, um, again, maybe this could have been an innocent error in data entry, or are they forecasting this? Is this what's going on, or is there maybe a mistake? Maybe this didn't actually start yet, or it didn't finish yet, and I need to find out what is going on with this particular project. Now, hopefully, I've given you kind of a a flavor, a taste of what P6-QA can monitor for you and help you with as you are moving through your schedules, not only when you are building them, but also as they're updating. Um, this could potentially help with, well, it can help with your schedulers self-critiquing themselves as they go along, building their schedules, receiving, information in, and self-critiquing. So you don't have to use your head scheduler to critique each one of these schedules. It's going to help them save some time there. Again, as Nicole mentioned, you are going to eliminate needing to go out to third party contractors to help critique your schedules because you just don't have the time to do it. The idea was this to P6-QA was to make it easier to see those schedules and the criteria that are important to your organization so that you can self-critique, you can build and keep your schedules in line in a much easier fashion. So before I give it back to Nicole, um, I want to make sure that there isn't something that someone may want to see before I leave there.
I don't think there's anything specific yet in the chat.
Okay.
There were a variety of questions, and I've been trying to answer them as we've gone through, but I don't think there's anything specific.
Okay.
I think what is good to make sure people understand is this tool, when we sell it with a bit of consulting because we always end up creating some specific quality metrics for different clients. So we can add to them usually relatively easily, 1 to 2 hours of work. That calendar one that Sue showed you, that was a bit more specific and a little bit more in depth. But because of all the tools that we've built over the years, we can add things to this product. So one of the questions was, do you have anything right now that lets you know whether we've got a good balance of activities? So that might be a specific metric that I'm not sure. It might be in a certain one of the standards. There's a lot of them out there. But one idea would be, okay, let's count out the number of WBSs. Let's count the volume of activities in each of the WBS. Let's look at the total durations and come up with a metric. So that is not something that would be hard to add to the tool, and make sure that we add it in such a way that it would work for many different clients, and you can add your own flavor to it. Okay, so there are a lot of things that we can do with this tool. So I want you to just keep that in mind. But I don't think there was anything specific that came up that you need to show right now.
Okay, then I'll give it back to you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let me grab it back and do the wrap up. Okay, so Sue gave us a good rundown on it. Hopefully you came away with the idea that although we've got all these different quality metrics, you can control them. If you're looking for a long duration on a turnaround project where you're working in hours versus a capital project that goes on for 100 years, it's quite a bit different. So you can control all that right within the tool. That was our intent, was to give all the schedulers working in P6 something that they can work with right in P6, not a third-party expensive tool that only 1 or 2 of your schedulers is allowed to use. That was not our strategy at all. We were trying to make sure that every scheduler had something to help be able to critique their own work, critique the work of schedules they were receiving. That was the objective here, so that you can do a better job very quickly. You didn't always have to go to your senior scheduler to help you. You could do it yourself. That was the strategy that we took. So maybe a different approach to some of the competitive tools on the market, but we wanted a tool that was in every scheduler's hand, helping them do their day-to-day functions. So, so some of the feedback that we've received. So I'm not a full-time scheduler. I'm a finance person, but this P6-QA report made sense to me. Okay, so that was from a project. I'll touch on that project. It was a huge project in New York. It was a pencil skyscraper in downtown New York in Manhattan. The project was over $600 million project, and the developer was not an expert in scheduling by any stretch. So I helped the the CFO, analyze the schedule in less than 2 hours. It was an 8,000 activity schedule at a very high level, right? So we ran P6-QA, and I could tell right away that there was so much logic missing. There were so many long activities. And I could tell him within not even 8 hours of my effort what gaps he had in the schedule. So that's hugely important for management to be able to get a critique of a schedule very quickly. And then on subsequent uploads, he just ran the tool and he could do the critiquing. And then if he needed my help, I could jump in and help him. Okay, but this is the intent of this tool, is to help critique schedules very, very quickly. In terms of the standards, okay, now I don't need to ask my lead scheduler every time for help when I get contractor schedules. So that's another thing. One of our key clients, it's a Department of Transportation group. They're not all P6 experts, but they can critique the schedules on every single update, and they get updates every 2 weeks. And they can see the metrics very quickly. They can compare them to the last schedule, so they can see whether it got better or worse and where some of the areas need to be improved on. So that, again, was the objective of building this tool. This critical path reliability, very, very important piece, right? If we've got open ends on either side, you may not have a true critical path. So it's very important to be able to see whether or not you've got a gap there out of the gate. So the tool does that very quickly. And as I mentioned, it's easy to introduce new metrics, and metrics that will adhere to your specifications. Okay, so that's an important piece as well. If you've asked for something in the spec and you want to monitor it, you want to be able to do it quickly. So we monitor resources, whether they're named properly, whether they're labeled properly, resource assignments, whether we're over, under, whether they forgot to update them. You know, you can see a lot of stuff very quickly. Okay, let's just see. I see a lot of questions. Sue, how are we doing? Did we get through them, or do we need to jump into any of the questions here?
The one I haven't answered yet is, can we see out of sequence activities?
We don't flag that specifically, but I don't think that would be that hard to add to the tool as a specific thing, whether it's out of sequence. I don't think we have that right now, do we, Sue? I don't think so.
No, we don't.
Not as its own.
Not specifically,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, okay. That would not, I don't think that would be very hard to add to the tool. Okay, so we'll take a note of that as a request. Okay, so you got all the others?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's wrap up. So if you do have any other questions, throw them in and we'll try and get to them. If not, we'll follow up after the session if we don't quite get to them today. So I hope you see that we are very collaborative. That is how all of our tools have been built. So we built them in many cases for our clients. We've got some very large clients that we've worked for 20, 25 years. And we built the tools in some cases to support them or to help them do things themselves. And then because other people needed it our toolkit started to grow. So we've got a large toolkit related to all of Oracle Primavera tools, but specifically P6. So today, of course, we're looking at our QA tool, but we've got our loader tool, which lets you push and pull virtually every piece of data in P6 into Excel. We've got our calculator tool, which we use as the foundation inside of here. And that tool lets us do all sorts of different calculations, roll-ups, push-downs of data inside of P6. It lets us monitor all sorts of things. So loops, lets us auto backup projects, auto archive projects. So it lets us do all sorts of things. So that's another one you should look at. And then we've got our updating tools. So we've got our TAPS tool, which is a barcode updater. And some of you have used that that are on today. And we've got our CAPS tool, which is a nice tabular web app updating methodology. Again, we're just trying to make the investment you got in P6 work better for you. We're trying to make sure that more people are helping keep the P6 environment working. So those are some other tools. And our probably newest tool, but it's really getting a lot of traction, is our P6 Scrubber tool. So that helps you make sure when you bring a project in through an import that you don't muddy up your P6. So we've got a huge toolkit on P6 that you should definitely explore, make your lives better in P6. So we tried to get to all the questions. If we didn't, Sue's email is there. And you can definitely send us an email. You can phone us, reach out, and see if there's anything else that we can help with this tool or some of the others that we've got in our toolkit as well. Okay, let me make sure I didn't miss any questions. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so I don't see any right now, but yeah, definitely send us any follow-ups and we'll be happy to see whether we can put P6-QA out of the box or whether there's a few more criteria we need to add in, and just let us know, we'll figure it out. So thanks so much for attending. I think I'll stop the recording here. We'll stay on for another minute if there are any other questions that come through.